And just kind of as a tutorial, I guess you might say, does everybody understand how to work the mics? They're new. Be sure that those that find the right buttons and turn on. Got it? Thank you. Let's first of all then go to the minutes from the December meetings. I know there's 2 different days. The chair would entertain a motion to do both sets of minutes at once. I know we have some updated that were sent for the second day. If that's the wish of the committee to adopt those. And
so moved, Mr. Chairman.
There's a motion to adopt the minutes. I assume Representative Porter for both days.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next on the agenda is we have a proposed agenda in front of you. It's fairly short. And are there any motions to remove anything from the agenda? That's kind of the format we go through, and hopefully there's not a motion. The chair sees none. And so at this point then, the agenda is placed on the table for discussion. And the only item we have, of course, is the governor's recommended budget for 2026-27. And so, ladies and gentlemen, the floor now is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For those of you I haven't already met, I'm Lisa Hirschman, and I have been asked to serve as the Secretary of Management and Budget by Governor Braun. I can assure you that presenting the governor's proposed budget on my 4th day on the job is proof that state government operates much faster than your federal contemporaries. I'm joined by our state budget director, Chad Ranney, who many of you know, and I want to stop for a moment and express my appreciation for Joe Habig, Lisa Ackelbear, and the SBA team for their hard work and cooperation and help during the transition. As you know, the recent revenue and Medicaid forecasts suggest modest revenue growth over the biennium, as well as continuing cost pressures from Medicaid. The governor's recommended budget acknowledges those constraints while making significant investments in pre-K and K-12 education, fully funding projected Medicaid growth, preserving our state reserves and our AAA credit rating, and providing meaningful tax relief to families and retirees. We believe that by putting more money in Hoosiers' pockets, we seek to spur continued economic and job growth and help ease the inflationary pressures brought about by national economic conditions. To improve efficiency and customer service, the governor has reorganized the executive branch into several verticals, each led by a cabinet secretary. OMB will be looking for ways to drive shared outcomes, reduce administrative burdens, and lower costs while enhancing our value and service to Hoosiers. We've already found some opportunities, and through his recent executive orders, Governor Braun has empowered us to move ahead quickly on this mission. The governor's budget makes the Choice Scholarship Program available for all Hoosier families, giving parents the ability to choose the best educational opportunities for their children. While expanding choice, the budget also invests $540 million over 2 years in our K-12 system, supporting our children and our teachers. And although it's not part of my presentation today, the governor intends to take steps to increase minimum teacher salaries from $40,000 to $45,000. As I mentioned, the budget also fully funds close to $1.7 billion in projected Medicaid growth. And we will also be eliminating the wait list for child care subsidies. Through targeted cost reductions and fiscal discipline, we're able to make these investments while maintaining a structural surplus each year and modestly growing our reserves to protect our state against any unforeseen fiscal pressures. This is a brief overview of top-line issues, and I'll ask Chad to dive into the governor's recommended budget in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you all. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I'm honored to be in front of you today. I think over a decade ago, I began as a Senate intern, and I'm not sure I ever had this on my bingo card, but here we are. So it is truly a pleasure. As the Secretary mentioned, I'll be going through the governor's recommended budget, beginning with a financial overview, which she largely gave and you're all familiar with, followed by comments regarding funding our commitments in the state of Indiana and the governor's priorities, which involve the freedom and opportunity agenda, right-sizing the size of government, Hoosier tax relief, education, public safety, and health and family services. Again, as the Secretary mentioned, the governor's recommended budget does, the guiding principles on which the governor's recommended budget is built is a balanced budget with structural surpluses in each year. For those who may not be familiar, structural surplus means revenues are greater than the expenditures that we have. And again, maintaining a credit rating while funding the governor's priorities is something else we intend to do. High-level overview, again, something you're all familiar with since you saw it last month, is the revenue forecast. I wanted to provide this slide to provide context and a little bit more information on the environment in which we're going to be operating over the next 2 years of the biennium. As the Secretary mentioned, we've seen growth in the past, but we do expect after the first year of the biennium, growth to largely flatline, and that's certainly something that we are dealing with at the budget agency and the governor is well aware of as we continue to fund his priorities. On this next slide, you'll see general fund appropriations by functional category as they appear in the governor's recommended budget. As in the past, you'll notice that education, health and human services, and public safety are the three largest categories, equaling just over 93% of the overall state budget. In the past, that number has been closer to 90%, but the increase is largely driven by an increase in health and human services funding, as well as a slightly smaller increase in education funding. And this remains true for both years of the biennium. Okay, I will start then, or go into financial overview, the budget development process. So operating and capital budget instructions were sent out to all agencies on May 1st. I'd like to thank the agencies for cooperating with the budget agency and submitting all of their budget information and requests. The instructions that we sent to agencies established that the base budgets for fiscal year 26 and 27 would be fiscal year 25 appropriations. So agencies were instructed to consider 25 what they were building from. Those budget submissions were then turned around and submitted to the budget agency on August 9th before the statutory deadline, and then were handed over to the governor-elect's transition team for review beginning in November after the election. Again, to provide context for some of the numbers we saw on the appropriations slide is the growth in Medicaid. This is one of the challenges and opportunities the state faces as we move forward. As the Secretary mentioned, this is not a surprise because it's based on a forecast, but the governor's recommended budget does fully fund Medicaid based on the projected growth in that forecast. Again, we intend to fully fund actuarially determined contribution rates and appropriate the required annual amounts to cover appropriation-backed debt. Again, something that has been a foundational principle and guiding principle in the state of Indiana for a long time. These do not, and typically have not changed with administration and have largely been agreed on as bipartisan efforts. So I'd like to thank members of the General Assembly on both sides of the aisle for their efforts to ensure that this remains true. With that, I'll go into the governor's priorities. As part of the Freedom and Opportunity agenda, the governor is committed to reducing the size of government. Over the biennium, there's total reductions of $700 million, with $540 million of those being target, $180 million of those dollars being administrative reductions. As part of those administrative reductions, the Secretary and I have worked with agencies and the budget agency to identify administrative funds within each agency, and the governor is committed to cutting those funds by 5%. That's reflected in the budget you see in front of you, and that is the goal for this administration. I want to be clear that the reduction of 5% in that goal because we use administrative funds, does not necessarily mean cutting in staff, cutting in personnel, and those things. The Secretary and I are committed to working with agencies, working with the General Assembly and others to find efficiencies within agencies. The Secretary has told this story many times, but we have already, through working with the agencies, found a number of areas where we can provide or work to gain additional efficiencies, purchasing, contracts, and things like that, leveraging the state's purchasing power and our contracting ability. We're confident that the $180 million goal will be reached, and we thank the General Assembly for working with us on that. Next is Hoosier tax relief. In addition to funding the governor's priorities, the governor has committed to providing Hoosiers with tax relief. $265 million in fiscal year 26, $431 million in fiscal year 27. These are dollars that will remain in Hoosiers' pockets, which should provide relief from inflation and other pressures that Hoosiers face today. First on the list of the priorities for tax relief are inflation-adjusted income tax deductions or exemptions. The governor's budget indexes the personal exemption, the dependent exemption, the exemption for individuals 65 and older, and the additional exemption for individuals 65 and older who may be blind or make less than $40,000 a year. This means going forward, as inflation continues to rise, so too will the value of the deduction or the exemption that individuals are able to claim, ensuring that Hoosiers receive the full value of the benefit that they have been promised through our tax code. The next key here is eliminating tax on tipped income. This is something the governor ran on during his campaign and intends to make good on, as well as eliminating the tax on retirement income. So all streams of retirement income would be exempt. Under the governor's budget to manage this, it would be introduced as a 4-year phase-in, beginning in 25, first claimed by taxpayers on their tax returns in 26. Again, this is a phased-in exemption, 25% each year over the course of a 4-year period. Next is an enhanced farm safety net in the form of preferred savings accounts. Then a young beginning farmers tax credit, which is intended to provide a tax credit to retiring farmers who turn around and sell their farms and their businesses to young and beginning farmers. Again, this is one of the governor's priorities in terms of ensuring that Indiana remains an agricultural powerhouse in the Midwest and worldwide. Finally, the governor is committed to a sales tax holiday, which we've accounted for in this budget. The sales tax holiday would provide Hoosiers relief when buying back-to-school supplies, youth sporting equipment, and outdoor recreational equipment. As the Secretary mentioned, education is an important part of the governor's overall budget. And for that reason, we have committed to an increase in tuition support of 2% in the first year and an additional 2% in the second year. As the Secretary mentioned, this is just over $500 million. The governor is also committed to expanding the school choice program, choice scholarship program, and making it universal, which is also accounted for in the governor's budget. This will ensure students, all students in the state of Indiana, have choice to go to the schools that's best for them. And then we also see increases to the career scholarship account, $2 million to help ensure students are prepared for the careers of tomorrow through getting credentials of value, working with the Department of Education and the Treasurer of State. The governor is committed to ensuring that happens. And then a significant increase in the education scholarship account. The education scholarship account, I'll remind everybody, is for students with disabilities and their siblings to allow them to go out and purchase the services and educational opportunities that best meets their needs. And then finally, there's an additional $50 million for other education initiatives that the governor has outlined, including but not limited to ensuring that we have a strong teacher pipeline, supply and demand marketplace, which the Department of Education is already in the process of building, and as well as ensuring parents and students own and have access to their data at all times. Public safety is another part of the freedom and opportunity agenda included in this budget. And the governor has committed $91 million over the biennium to fund local prosecutors and the Prosecuting Attorneys Council. There's an additional $5.6 million in one-time funding to the Indiana National Guard, $5 million for additional funding for secured school safety, and $1 million to restore memorials. I think as part of the reorganization that the Secretary mentioned, the Office of School Safety will be moving over to the Department of Homeland Security to further consolidate functions and produce administrative savings. And this is recognized by the fact that we've also reallocated $5 million to ensure that our schools remain safe. And finally, as part of the Freedom and Opportunity Agenda, the governor is committed to eliminate the wait list for child care subsidies in the CCDF. The governor's budget appropriates $362 million to this program to ensure that early child care remains available to all families. It also creates a local child care assistance fund, which will allow local communities to help subsidize and foster child care opportunities at the local level. And then it fully funds the Medicaid forecast. Again, that's $680 million in the first year of the biennium, with an additional $1 billion in the second year of the biennium. So in conclusion, we have unprecedented economic headwinds that we are facing. That is, again, that's not a surprise to anybody here, as you've all seen the forecast. But the governor has found a way to provide tax relief to Hoosiers and fully fund his initiatives while maintaining that structural surplus we talked about earlier, right-sizing government, and providing Hoosiers with tax relief. Before I conclude, I would like to echo the Secretary's thanks for the State Budget Agency and the staff of the State Budget Agency. There are probably many who do not know I am the State Budget Director at this point, as I've not had a chance to formally meet everybody, but everybody has played an instrumental role. They are truly an amazing group of public servants who are dedicated to ensuring Indiana's priorities are funded today and tomorrow. And this may embarrass her, but I'd also like to give a special thanks to Lisa Ackerberg for the amount of patience that she has shown, the leadership she has shown, and her willingness to sit down and educate me and answer all of my questions. So that's truly inspiring. So thank you, Lisa. And with that, I would ask that the committee hold its questions to the next biennium once I've grown into the job a little bit. So thank you.
You know, I have to apologize. Some things I can't do. I'll try to help you all I can, but that one I probably can't get.
I understand. Thank you, sir.
Representative Netskoski, Netskoski, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. That's been Kadora. I'm sorry, Kadora.
There you go. I think for every time you get my name wrong, I get budget request approved, correct?
Oh, if that's the case, you'll have a lot approved, won't you?
There you go. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Secretary and Director, congratulations on your new roles. Welcome to state government, and I look forward to working with you. I think I'll start with the positive. First, thank you for meeting with us earlier today to share with us the information. It was very helpful. There are many of the priorities that you listed that I'm very happy to see, including the funding of the Medicaid forecast and the funding to eliminate the CCDF projected wait list. These are things that I agree with. And some of the tax deductions that are proposed by the governor, such as the tax holidays and the exemption on retirement, are also things that I do support, so I appreciate you for including that. I have a couple of technical questions that follow up on our meeting today. With the Medicaid funding, do you anticipate that that would fund the wait list for the Pathways waiver program? Currently, we have about 9,000 individuals on the wait list. Does that funding include eliminating the wait list?
It does, based on the no, I'm sorry, excuse me, it does not. The funding that's included in there is the funding that matches what is forecasted, so it does not include that.
I appreciate the answer. The second question, as far as the statement of combined balances that shows that our surplus would grow from in fiscal year 2025 from $2.5 billion to $2.97 billion in 2026, followed by $2.9 billion. So we will notice approximately about $440 million increase in the state surplus. At the same time, when I look at funding for public education, you're planning 2% increase in year one, 2% in year two, but also you're incorporating the universal expansion of vouchers. We have 1 million students in our public schools, and I wonder, wouldn't it be more of a strategic economic development investment to move the $400 million of surplus into public education so that the 1 million students and their teachers can get the investments that they need over, and we will maintain a surplus, AAA balanced budget. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think generally the thought is knowing the economic headwinds we're facing, it is important to maintain not only the surplus in both years, but to provide some cushion. So the 2% over 2%, I think is fairly generous at this point. And I think that we're happy to talk about this further as the governor's budget is presented in the House and then over in the Senate. But at the moment, I think we're comfortable with maintaining the $519 million surplus in year one, given how thin the margins are in year two.
I appreciate that, and I know this is just the beginning of the process, and we have 4 months to finalize the details. I just would urge you that over the last decade, even prior to COVID, with $2 billion in surplus, the state maintained the AAA rating. So with $2.9 billion at a time of desperate need for public education, I would just urge you to consider continuing to work with the General Assembly on this. The final piece that I do support, but I would urge you to raise the bar on your advocacy for that, is the teacher salary increases. So you suggested there's a bill moving forward with increasing teacher compensation from $40,000 to $45,000. In Indiana, in 2025, the federal poverty line for a family of 4 is about $43,000. So to raise the teacher's salary to $45,000, this is 112% of the federal poverty line, roughly speaking. You're expanding the vouchers, which currently stand at 742% of the federal poverty line, while teachers, we're urging to fund teachers at the 112% of the federal poverty line. I think from an economic development perspective, for the future of Indiana to be competitive, to raise entrepreneurs and innovators and business leaders and civic leaders, I urge you to continue to think about $60,000 to $65,000 for teachers. And I'll conclude by saying, as a person who works in finances every single day professionally outside of this place, to me the question is not about the revenue increases over the next biennium. Even if the revenue increases are zero, you are presenting a proposed budget of $46 billion over the biennium.
Yes, sir.
So the question is, what are the priorities in that budget? I'm very happy to support a few of these ideas. I still have concerns about the Medicaid wait list, and then the teacher compensation, and the 2% funding for our schools that incorporates universal vouchers at a time when our schools, according to Michael Hicks, the economist, over the last 15 years have been underfunded when you factor inflation to the tune of $3 billion. So we are not underinvesting if we add $400 or $500 million to their funding. I look forward to working in a bipartisan fashion with the governor's office to support you in every way so that Hoosiers can succeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Further questions? Representative Delaney?
Yes, thank you. I don't believe we talked about the public health initiative that we passed in the last couple of years. Are you adjusting the amount being dedicated to the statewide public health program from what it was proposed to be?
Yes, sir. So
What's the nature of that adjustment?
Yeah, absolutely. The governor's proposed, so in the past, it's been funded at, I believe, $150 million per year, at least over the last 2 years of the past biennium. The governor's budget brings that down to $100 million per year.
So over the budget period, it would be $100 million less for the county-based public health efforts, if I got my math right. Okay. That's a significant cut. What's happening to the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, specifically to a program I think it's called READI, R-E-A-D-I? What is your proposal as to that program?
So the proposal does nothing with that program, Representative. And one of the reasons for that is, my understanding is in the past budget, READI 2.0 was appropriated as a below-the-line item with no expected continuation for appropriation in subsequent budgets.
So you're
the
not,
governor's budget does not provide any additional dollars for READI 2.0.
To put it, probably not in an accounting term, it's being zeroed out going forward?
It is being allowed to expire as
Okay.
I think the legislature
Thank you.
intended.
Thank you. I have to call my friend the Undertaker to ask him how you describe these these things. Okay, that's very, very helpful. I'm particularly concerned about the teachers. I just want to caution you, your idea of raising the starting teacher pay experience that I had as long ago as when I was in the Navy shows me that when you raise the starting pay, everybody else expects a raise above them. So that's just life, that's fair, that's expected. What do you expect the overall cost will be? We have 60,000 in just the public schools, we have 60,000 teachers. what do you think the cost of this one change will be?
Yeah, I don't have those numbers on me, Representative. I'll have to get back with you on that
And
one.
it's a complicated thing, and I appreciate that you guys are just, as someone suggested, that you're not really drinking from the fire hose, you're drinking from the device we use to get the dirt off the
power
walls, the
washer.
power washer. And so I appreciate that.
The mighty currents of the Wabash.
Another thing I want to mention that it gets almost no attention and affects almost everything I've done on the budget issue for the last few years is that we're some 4 or 5 years away from what I call the springboard. What's the springboard? That's the happy day when we don't have to keep funding underfunded pensions. We'll fund them on the normal basis, but the catch-up program should end in 28 or 29. It's not a precise date. That's worth about $800 million or more a year. And I would like to hear from the governor and others, what happens on that happy day? What we've been doing in the meanwhile is making what I consider small cuts in personal income tax. The cuts are too small to really help people to any great extent. If you make $100,000 and we cut 0.5% off your taxes, you're at $500. But when you aggregate all those small nicks at the revenue stream, it gets big. So I hope you'll take a look at whether that's a wise policy, whether the pressure on property tax in part comes from what we're doing on the income tax side. I would suggest that it does. I want to thank you for your tone on some of the remarks. You did manage to say that you wanted to, quote, reduce the size of government. And fortunately, you didn't say it was bloated, because I was going to ask you how that happened, given who's been running the state for the last 20 years. But your more gentle tone is appreciated, and I understand why you want to be efficient in government. But I don't think attacking government is something, and I'm not hearing that. The next concern I have is I'm reluctant to even talk about it, but is the proposed increase for the National Guard adequate if the federal government begins putting additional loads on the National Guard to deal with what I think is a federal problem, the immigration problem? Have you come up with a number as to what it might cost us if we're pressured to take a major role in that? I think you need to look at that, because that's going to cause a lot of disagreements, a lot of pain and misery if it happens, but it also is going to take money. And I think we need to pay some attention to that. That would be, I think it's just prudent to be aware of that. In the same token, I hope you're going to work up some scenarios if the new administration in Washington cuts Medicaid substantially. Depending on the program, we get between like 70%, 90% support from Washington. If they cut it or if they go to this block grant system, I hope you'll be prepared. Some of that could happen before we're out of here in April. In some ways, it might be worse if it happened after, because we might pass a budget and then find ourselves undercut. So I appreciate some thought on that. And the last thing I want to say, I didn't see anything in here to increase home ownership. And yes, you're putting some of the pre-K back, but you're not increasing it as I read it. And you're only doing one of the CCDF program, not the other pre-K programs. I don't want to find myself in a position where, because you're cutting the income taxes for retirees substantially, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. If I got the numbers right, the first year that we began cutting or reducing income tax on pension income, we lose $153 million. The next year we lose $310 million. And then doing the math, it should be $450 to $700 million per year going forward. Well, there goes that springboard. So instead of funding pensions for the elderly, which we should, we're going to be funding tax cuts for the elderly. I don't see anything in here for home ownership. I don't see anything to grow preschool. I don't want to be in a state that's focus is driven on the elderly, even though I apparently am one of them. So I think we got to build for the future. So I think I'd suggest that the governor take a look at that. There are some good things. I told him that if I saw some good stuff, I'd give him muted praise. I guess that means a little bit of praise. So he's getting his little praise, but those are my thoughts, and thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Representative Porter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you again for being here, Madam Secretary, Director Rainey. And just a few comments, and again, thank you for the meeting that transpired earlier today. One thing that's I want us to really think about more is the public health funding. At 225 total, the first year, probably 89 counties opt into that project, to those dollars. Then the second year, all 92 counties took advantage of the public health grant. There shows that there's a need, and at local health departments, I think is very important because it helps them, it keeps them out of the emergency room. And I think that's something that, if we look long-term, we can't just say we're going to cut it back to $100 million and leave it at that. I think we will do ourselves a disservice in the not a long term, but short term. So I want us to really, like for you to really reconsider that again. Pre-K, reconsideration of that. Not the vouchers, pre-K. Kentucky, West Virginia, Oklahoma has fully funded pre-K. Here we are, we're beginning to be the island again. And education is very important, so we need to continue to look at education from that perspective in regards to pre-K. And in addition, I would encourage us to, been talking about it for a while, do I was talking about the April forecast? Sure. I really think, and I've said it for a couple of years now, we need to move it to March because the reason why we need to look at it from a snapshot from March is that when we get it in April, we have 4 or 5 days before we're out of session. And I think we need to look at it a little longer so we can have more time to digest it and not, as we often happens, vote on a budget or vote against a budget that we put forth in the last 24 to 48 hours. I know this is the first bite of the budget apple, and we have 3 more bites to go. I like Fuji apples, so it's a little sweet, but for some people. But I hope as we go forth, we'll really consider have you engaged with the chairman and everyone to look at the apple as it goes through the House and the Senate, and of course it's going to be in the conference committee. So let us not be fooled. This is not it. We have a long way to go, and I really hope that some of the things that I've discussed and that hopefully we can initiate some of those thought processes when it comes to looking at the human infrastructure, and we as a state, as the fiscal leaders, that we are included as a body. I'm 1/5 of it, and that as being 1/5 of it, that some of our considerations are done as we build the next biennial budget. Again, thank you for meeting with us today, and I look forward for a robust conversation with some meaningful outcomes for all Hoosiers, because we, as a state, we have to have the will to do what we need to do for Hoosiers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Snow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for your hard work on the budget, and thank you for the presentation. I don't have anything real specific to ask on, but I've been doing a lot of work, having conversation with my colleagues, the Ways and Means members, as well as other chairmen of committees. And I may be a little different in terms of what I've challenged them to think about is the way I do things in my own business is I look for efficiencies. And that, in my opinion, the best way to get cost savings. And so I applaud what you've done with the budget thus far. I look forward to working with you folks. It's interesting, some of my peers have challenged me when I bring that up to them, and they say, Craig, you got to remember, government is not necessarily a business. And I respond with, that may be true, possibly, but the money's still green. So, I want to take not a radical approach, but a very common sense approach to the budget. I look forward to working with my peers this year. And the one thing I would just suggest we all always think about as well, and I had a meeting this morning that it kind of highlighted a topic, is what we may be seeing at the federal level in terms of cuts, and that all flows downhill. And while I recognize there's a nice surplus at the end of the biennial budget, but we very well may find ourselves in a situation where we have to use that surplus for things we don't foresee yet. And so that's something I don't want to forget about. I want to be, again, very fiscally prudent. And again, thank you for your work on this. I look forward to working with all of you, including my peers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Niskoski, I got it right that time, didn't I?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes, sir,
thank you.
Mr. Chair. And thank you very much. And Lisa and Chad, thank you very much. And welcome and congratulations again.
Thank you.
We clearly have a very, very huge role in front of us all. I have a very strong feeling that there is a good chance. This is just the beginning, and there's going to be a lot that is going to change within this time. I believe we have a lot of similar priorities with education, healthcare, housing, public safety, property taxes. I think we just have a different vision of how we can get there and what we can do to help Hoosiers. And we have a long process, and this is the beginning. And I hope that by the time we conclude on April 28th, that we find, I believe it's April 28th, we find the means that we can all go home. And when it comes to Medicaid and some of these other huge programs that we're looking at changing, I hope we can still do what's right for our children, for those that are severely disabled, and just do more with trying to work with an amount of dollars in this budget that we know is still going to be extremely tight. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Would you like to close? Feel free to. You're not required to.
Again, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for giving us this opportunity. And it's so encouraging to hear your feedback, your thoughtful comments. You have given us a lot to think about and take into consideration. And we understand this is just the first report, if you will. We are a third of the process. We know that both chambers will have input, and we are looking forward to working with you as we learn things. We want to share them with you as we dive into data and developing more data to determine what's adding value, what's not, where we can make changes. We'd like to continue to keep you in the loop on those things and share them with you. So you have my personal commitment that we will continue to do that. So thank you again for all the meetings this week, and thank you for your comments today. Appreciate it.
Thank you. We're at that point on the agenda. Is there any motions by chance to remove the only item on the agenda from the agenda? Good. I hope not. With that, I entertain a motion to formally adopt the agenda as presented.
So move.
Is there a second? Motion and second. Any discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? It carried unanimous. Thank you, and I believe that's all that is on the agenda today. And so with that, we stand adjourned. Thank you.